Alright, the main challenge associated with the Cruiser is that it has a double strength small nuke. Fortunately, he likes to orbit within optimal and moves relatively slow. This allows us to swap the prop mod for another cap module. The Nergal still won't be cap stable under the nuke pressure, but that's easily compensated for by micromanaging the remote armor rep. Also, eagle-eyed viewers might note that the DPS looks really low. That's because normally you'd be looking at raw DPS. Here, I set the target resist profile to that of the burner Cruiser. Thus, the DPS you see here will be much closer to your actual DPS. Okay, there were some missions where I waffled back and forth on how much player skill the fits would require. For example, some fits might require a lot more cap management or allow you to get away with one less tanking module by overheating your hardeners. Ultimately, however, I decided against fits like that. Now, if you want to go that route, by all means go for it. In fact, cap-hungry fits shouldn't pose that much of a problem because you have capacitor alarms that will alert you to mistakes. Unfortunately, there are no such alarms for heat, so it's much easier to make a mistake and burn out a module while dual boxing. Regardless, I ended up being rather conservative with my standard fits. Changes are mostly going to be limited to swapping the kinetic rig to a hyperspatial velocity optimizer, swapping the Corelli remote armor rep for a Senti, and the addition of some implants. Once again, the Senti remote armor rep does have higher fitting and cap requirements, but I figured that players that use these fits will have better skills. Besides, the implants will also help out with both cap and CPU. Regardless, the extra repping power is kind of important because it helps to offset the loss of the kinetic rig. I'm recommending mid-grade ascendancies for implant slots 1 through 5. Naturally, high grades will give you an even better ISK efficiency, but they only provide a 6% faster warp speed for a whopping 260% increase in price. That's also why I'm only recommending 5% skill implants instead of 6. It just takes way too long for that extra 1% of benefit to pay for itself. Anyway, the CPU and cap management implants help with fitting and the increased cap cost of the remote rep. A gunnery implant was chosen over surgical strike because it results in greater damage being applied to the target. Remember, a rate of fire implant doesn't just mean we fire faster, it means we spool up faster as well. As you can see from this chart, the difference in total damage inflicted is rather inconsequential within the first 30 seconds or so. However, as time passes, the rate of fire implant pulls farther and farther ahead. So, if we take a look at the instant where we achieve the max separation between these options, we'll see that the fit with the 5% raw damage implant will have performed as expected and done 5% more damage. However, if we take a look at the rate of fire implant, we'll see that it has done nearly 8% more damage. So, unless you plan on alphaing something off the field with your Nergal, the gunnery implant is always better than the surgical strike option. Speaking of which, give greater priority to rate of fire over the damage multiplier when you're making or buying up abyssal entropic radiation sinks. And if you're ever unsure which mod is better, you can plug them into Python and make a graph. Finally, there wasn't any must-have implants for slot 7 and 10 for the Nergal, so I picked 2 that would benefit the ship most commonly used to blitz standard level 4 missions. Anyway, those are all the changes most frequently seen between the entry and standard fits: adding implant, swapping the rig, and swapping the remote armor rep. Usually any other changes you see will be small optimizations, so I'm not going to cover more standard fits unless they feature a substantial change. And of course, all these fits will be provided in a Google Docs document. The crew fight is rather simple. Now, you will have to manage your remote reps in order to save cap, but you have plenty of overhead, so it's not like you're going to need Korean StarCraft player levels of execution. Regardless, I recommend setting your armor alarms to around 85 to 90% because the audio cue can help alert you to any aggro switches you might miss. I don't recommend setting it any higher than that, however, because then you could end up with a scenario where your HP keeps oscillating back and forth between the alarm threshold as you take damage and get reps. Naturally, that would cause your alarms to constantly go off and defeat the whole purpose. Anyway, play around with it, see what works best for you. Past that, I recommend keeping the crew at range. It's not that big of a deal here because I don't have any prop mods fitted, but orbiting with the prop mod will definitely screw with the tracking of whoever isn't tackled. So always keep at range unless you need to keep your speed up for taking purposes. And that's pretty much it. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Oh, and you also want to keep at range as far out as possible in order to help your tracking, but you don't want it so far that you're accidentally losing your spool either. So I went with about half the range of the disintegrator. I thought that was a good starting point based upon the stats of the first burner I fought, but you also have burners like the Dramiel which move even faster and have an even smaller sig radius. So after further review, I'm going to recommend starting out with the 4K keep at range distance. If you have any problems, dial it back a bit, but I don't think it'll be an issue. Anyway, I got 1 minute and 42 seconds from gate activation to rat death with the standard fit, but I also forgot my drones, so there's definitely room for improvement. Also, do note that I did test all of these with my entry-level fits, and they all work. I'm showing video of the standard fits because I decided to go back and clean up my execution for the video and decided that I might as well use the faster fits while doing it. The Enyo, Hawk, Jaguar, and Vengeance missions all work the same. You fight an assault frigate with a 13k web, a 12k scram, and 2 Logifrigs backing them up. Normally, you'd have to kill one or both Logifrigs in order to break the tank of the assault frigate, but we do enough damage with dual Nergals that isn't necessary. And considering that we'd have to catch them and spool up, it might actually be slower. Regardless, all these fits use the same rigs, highs, and mids. We only need to change out our lows and drones, depending on the damage and resist profiles of the rats. Anyway, I don't think I need to break down each fit Barney style. You can find the specific fits in the Google Doc link down below. Same thing goes for the standard fits. They all make the standard upgrades. Swap the rig and remote armor rep, add implants. These fights couldn't be easier. Lock up the rats, approach them, lock up your alts and establish reps, start blapping. You'll have plenty of caps so you won't even have to manage that. Just keep at range to prevent tracking issues on the alt who isn't web. Easy peasy, cool and breezy. Okay, this one is interesting. So, it is possible to beat this mission without taking a single point of damage by speed and sig tanking. However, in order to do that, you need to know how to spiral in and establish an orbit without letting your transversal drop too low. Moreover, running the site more slowly can create complications. Thus, I'm conflicted about how much tank I should recommend for the entry-level fit. So, I guess I'll let you decide. If you don't trust your manual piloting skills, slap 2 enams on there. Now, I doubt you can straight up face tank the site with this fit, but it will give you plenty of headroom for mistakes. Regardless, as you begin to feel more comfortable with the site and your piloting skills, you can start peeling off tank. Anyway, the Taloses are spread out pretty far, so the MWD is to cut down on travel time. And the afterburners so that we can keep our transversal up and sig down while keeping a tight orbit on the Taloses when we engage them. We don't need a web because the Taloses are slow, and we don't need to worry about their sensor damps because our optimal range will be well inside our reduced targeting range. So, the only thing the damps manage to accomplish is to delay how quickly we can get our drones on them. The standard fit doesn't even bother with any resist mods. Like I said before, it's possible to finish the site without taking any damage, but even if you do pick up a grazing shot or two, you can take it because you have innate resist of 80% thermal and 40% kinetic. Alright, let's take a look at what we're dealing with. When you land on the Bacon, you'll be smack dab in the middle of this huge grid of proximity activated turrets, but as long as you don't get within 10 kilometers of one, it will remain neutral. And if you do accidentally activate some, don't panic. Keeping your transversal up will hurt their tracking considerably. Anyway, once you land, you want to turn your MWDs on, get out to the first Talos, and then work your way around. Now, here's the rub. If you take too long to kill the first 2 Taloses, the third has a tendency to wander into the grid of turrets. Naturally, this is less than ideal. However, I did use a 1 enam fit to intentionally activate a bunch of turrets and found that they aren't much of a threat as long as you can keep your transversal up and stay within rep range. Anyway, the safe and slow method is to keep your 2 alts together for this site. The fast way is to have them each kill a Talos and then meet in the middle. Obviously, you will be operating without a net this way, but it can shave about a minute off of your site completion time. But regardless of whatever method you use, you'll want to approach at an angle in order to keep your transversal up. And once you get close enough, you can establish an orbit and turn on your afterburner. Also, do note that it is possible to loot wrecks with hostiles on grid. Start by orbiting the wreck at your default orbit and then tighten it up until you're orbiting within 2,500 meters. Do not just click orbit at 500 meters or whatever, because that can cause your ship to make a hard turn and lose speed. Anyway, keeping your prop mod on will affect your tracking a little bit because burner Taloses have 125 meter sig and won't slow you down with webs. Unfortunately, you will need to keep your ABs on while fighting the first two Taloses, otherwise the ones that are far away would be able to hit you too easily. Once you've established an orbit on the final Talos, however, you can orbit without a prop mod. He still shouldn't be able to hit you, and you'll get the best possible tracking. Now, I realize that in this video the third Talos goes for my drones, but I have tested this and it does work. Still, feel free to establish the rep chain if you want to play it safe. Speaking of which, these guys will aggro drones, but they'll struggle to hit Warrior 2s. And while I'm at it, I receive very little drone aggro on all these sites. I've probably lost 2 drones out of 36 burner missions. If I had to wager a guess, I'd say that the remote reps are moving the ships up on the aggro table relative to the drones, which is fine by me. I prefer not to have my income reduced by needing to replace a billion T2 drones. So, the burner worm moves faster than the Affluenza kid plowing through a group of pedestrians. Even with 2 overdrive injectors, you'll still need heat to catch the guy. Now, I do know for a fact that it's possible to catch the worm with only 1 overdrive on this fit, but it really will be pushing things as far as heat damage is concerned. Thus, I decided to go with an asymmetrical setup. Give your faster all to Scram and 2 overdrives so that he can quickly and easily catch the worm, and the other one a web and 2 damage mods so that he can help finish him off more quickly. I recommended the usual changes for the standard fit, but I figured some people might want to drop down to 1 overdrive, so let's talk about it. Losing the armor rig will help you go a little bit faster. It helps, but it doesn't eliminate the risk of burning out your MWDs. Thus, if you're going to do it, I recommend throwing some money at your MWD. Before you go out and buy a Dead Space microwarp drive, however, consider rolling decayed mutaplasmas with restrained MWDs. The decayed mutaplasmas for 5 meganewton MWDs are relatively expensive, but you can treat CPU, power grid, and Sig Radius as dump stats for the purposes of this fit. Moreover, a restrained microwarp drive with a really good speed roll can actually give a larger speed bonus than non-mutated Dead Space variants. And I'll talk about abyssal mods towards the end of this video, so don't worry if none of that made any sense to you. Anyway, you shouldn't lose your ships if you screw up, but getting yourself out of your pickle is going to cost you time because he does have a 50k warp disruptor and likes to keep a 38k range. Fortunately, you can permutate the worm, so at least you don't have to worry about that. Regardless, the fastest option for dealing with this is to bring paste and or a mobile depot and a fresh prop mod. Once you've repaired or replaced your MWD, you can try and catch him again. Now, if you didn't bring a backup plan, you can always bat phone for help, but you can also get out by yourself. Well, I should state that I have not extensively tested this option, but I did actually do this once, so it can work. So, what you need to do is to align out, turn off your remote reps, and wait for him to aggro your drones. By not shooting, repping, or doing any E-War, your ship should drop on the aggro table relative to your drones. And, fortunately for us, he'll actually switch his point when he starts shooting at them. Still, you might want to be prepared to overheat your hardeners and re-establish the rep chain if he refuses to switch aggro. Alright, you want to give the worm as little of a head start as possible, so preheat your MWD before even entering the site. Then concentrate on getting moving and turning on your prop mod. You do have plenty of tank, so establishing reps should be a secondary concern. Once you land tackle, turn off your prop mods and start blapping. Easy peasy, hot and greasy. The Daredevil and the Succubus have different stats, preferred orbit ranges, and all of that jazz, but they work the same for our purposes. They both have long-range grabs and webs and like to orbit outside of normal web range. Solo players will deal with them by using faction webs, but we have 2 ships, so just use the guy who isn't webbed to land tackle. Oh, and in case you're curious, I'm pretty sure that these guys are immune to scrams, so that's why I went with dual webs. Anyway, you won't have a lot of cap with this fit, but the rats will actually help you manage it by turning off your MWDs, so that shouldn't be much of an issue. Naturally, swap out your lows and drones based upon what you're fighting. Once again, the details will be provided in the companion document, linked down below. And finally, you should probably use Mystic for this fight. Barian might also work, but you will almost certainly lose your spool if you use Occult. Fortunately, these fights are really forgiving as far as execution is concerned. Of course, you should try to land 4 webs on them as soon as you land, but even if you completely lose tackle, the MWDs will allow at least one of your tunes to catch back up and put 2 webs on them. Anyway, I did evaluate the Daredevil's difficulty at 2 stars because he does do a respectable amount of damage. So, if things start getting hairy, overheat your tank. And if you're flying the entry fit and have really crappy armor compensation skills, consider swapping out the passive resist mods for active hardeners. Doing so would mean that you would need to manage your remote reps in order to conserve cap, but it's not really that hard if you have your armor and cap alarm set correctly. Alright, the Eve devs apparently went to the Warframe School of Repetition, Warframe School of Repetition, Warframe School of Repetition when they designed this mission because it's a slog. You'll fight a wave of 3 dragonflies, a wave of 3 manises, and then do the same thing 2 more times. And to make matters even worse, you have to use Mystic on the dragonflies to make sure you don't lose your spool. And they do a lot of damage, so you can't really afford to fit a damage mod. Anyway, I suspect that dual Nergals are probably the wrong tool for the job, but I've also seen other YouTubers complain that this mission was a slog and not worth doing, so I don't know. I've toyed with the idea of dual Ikitursas, each with dual webs, but that's a mission for another day. As it stands right now, you can run the Super Carrier mission in dual Nergs, but it probably won't be worth your time. Anyway, you can catch the rats with only an afterburner fit, but it takes a while without heat, so you're probably just better off sticking with an MWD. The tank is also tailored to the damage profile of the dragonflies, as the manises will barely do any damage as long as you keep your speed up. And do note that Pyfa didn't have an incoming damage profile preset for the dragonflies. I had to manually enter it, so if you're wondering what that is, you can see it here. Also, this fit doesn't leave you with a lot of cap for such a long fight, but you should be cap stable as long as you only run either the remote rep or the MWD. So, what you want to do is only use your MWD long enough to catch the dragonflies and perma-run your remote reps when fighting them. Oh, and you should use Mystic against the dragonflies and Occult against the manises. So, I toyed around with some different ideas when it came to squeezing a damage mod on here. Like, you could try doing a mixed flight of combat and logi drones to make up for the lost tank, try to use heat to compensate, or slap a local rep on there. But they're all less than ideal. For example, you can repair heat damage to your tank while fighting the manises, but dual boxing 2 accounts through 3 waves greatly increases your chances of burning out a module. And the fit you're looking at here will require significant cap management for 3 waves. And for what? To shave 2 or 3 minutes off of a 25-minute mission? Whatever. At that point, I figure it's time to explore other ship options. But, like I said, that's a project for a later date. As for now, I recommend the usual upgrades for the standard fit. Fight the dragonflies like you'd fight the Daredevil. Use whoever isn't tackled to get tackle on the rat. After that, turn off your prop mod and use Mystic. Now, I didn't need to use heat, but you might want to be prepared to overheat your hardeners if your tank skills aren't quite up to snuff. Anyway, I orbited in this video, but you can try to keep at range and see if that helps you bring down your time. Just be prepared to re-establish orbit if your tank starts to fail. The manises will do an insignificant amount of damage if you keep your speed up, so try to spiral in a little bit. You don't have to get crazy with it. They do use missiles, so you don't have to worry about transversal, just speed. Just try to turn into them before using the keep at range command. What you don't want is for your ship to come to a complete stop as it tries to reverse direction. Past that, establish an orbit once you have one tackled, use Occult, and use that time to repair any heat damage on your tank and mods. And just for fun, I tried to see if I could kill the super carrier. I was able to damage it, but wasn't able to get it past 99% shields even at full spool, so. You don't need a prop mod against the Dramiel because he'll fly right into your optimal web range, so this fit trades the AB for another web. 4 of them will definitely take the spring out of his step and make him much easier to apply damage to. This fight is real simple. Webs, keep at range, drones, remote reps. Should be dead in under a minute. Easy peasy, George and Wheezy. Finally, the Angel Transport mission requires that we fight 4 Dramiels before we kill an industrial ship that's sitting a ways away. In order to deal with the insane DPS that will be coming in, we'll need to add a local rep to the lows and logi drones. Then, on top of that, we have to swap a web for a cap recharger in order to improve our cap stability. All of this will hurt our DPS, but it will allow us to more comfortably take the site. I decided to provide a more conservative standard fit, but I will give you guys some options. First, however, do note that I did swap the cap recharger for a second web. You'll have less cap, but you'll still have enough that managing your rep should be easy if you have your alarm set up properly. Now, for those looking to push things further, you can lose the Logi drones and use heat to compensate. Yet another option is to start out with Logi drones and then switch to combat drones as you start to thin out the Dramiels. You'll need to bring a mobile depot and a prop mod anyway so that you can quickly burn out to the Angel transport, so why not bring Logi and combat drones as well? Finally, you could also upgrade your tanking mods to more expensive variants. And do note that I don't recommend using agency hardshell boosters. They'll tie up your slot 11 booster for up to an hour and give you a relatively small bump in tank because it'll only affect the local rep. So if you are going to use agency drugs, use Pyrolancias because they'll benefit you on all missions. You'll fight the 4 Dramiels just as you would the lone one. The only differences are that you need to put Logi drones on your alts and you'll need to poop out a mobile depot at some point. They take a minute to anchor, so try to remember to do it before you actually need it. And yes, let's all point and laugh at me for not knowing about the anchoring restrictions of mobile depots. Regardless, slap a prop mod on and go kill the Angel transport after you kill the 4 Dramiels. He has plenty of tank but does an inconsequential amount of damage. And that's it. Easy peasy, blowjobs please me. I'm going to quickly cover a variety of topics related to running burners in the final video of the series. Newer players will likely get more mileage out of it, but stick around, you might learn something new. In fact, it's going to include a few things I didn't even know about until viewers told me, so check it out. I'll try to have it up before the end of next weekend. Alright, that's it. Don't forget to support all your favorite content creators, and until next time, bask in the glory of perfectly tiled clients, which I will discuss in the next video. Later.